In the name of the one who loves the beloved and love itself. Amen. Please be seated. Can you all hear me okay? Great. I used to be the vicar, which is the same as rector, in a parish in central London. It was a nice neo-Gothic building from the Victorian era. You might think that sounds lovely, but let me tell you, it was always falling apart, and we constantly had to be putting it back together again. So that was a bit of a nightmare. But it was pretty at the top of St. George's Square, and in England, there's a rule that when you are the parish priest, you marry everybody in the parish. If they ask you, you also bury and baptize anybody in the parish that asks you whether they come to church or not. It's this whole idea that every inch of England is covered by a parish church, and there is spiritual care for everybody. And we were a pretty church, so I had between 10 and a dozen weddings a year. And I had to kind of figure out some rules, because my Saturdays could often be really busy. So my rule with receptions was, if you didn't invite me ahead of time, I wasn't going to go, even if you thought of it as an afterthought on the day and said, oh, do come to the reception. I was like, no, you didn't invite me ahead of time, so I didn't plan it. So I have something else to do. If you did invite me ahead of time, I'd go, but I'd stay just to the speeches, and I wouldn't stay for the dancing, because nobody wants to see the priest dancing. Some of them really want to see the priest dancing. I don't want those ones seeing the priest dancing. So I would always leave just after the speeches. And as I'm talking to you, I'm remembering a wedding that I was at in which I found myself in the middle of today's gospel parable. A lovely couple who I adored, Abbas and Bethabel. Abbas was Nigerian, Bethabel was Ethiopian, and they came together in London. They were both lawyers, and they were doing really well in London, and they were getting married. And they wanted me to marry them because I was their parish priest, but they'd picked a country parish on the outskirts of London with a country house next door. It's going to be a picture book wedding, a banquet hall, fully catered and everything. And so I went along to this wedding, found my way there, took the wedding, did start a little bit late, but that's okay, and then got to the reception space. Now here's the thing. Most of the time, if somebody sent me an official invitation to the reception, I'd remember to respond, but not always. And sometimes the administration of the wedding party, they wouldn't necessarily remember if I responded or not. So I went up and I had a look at the seating chart, and my name wasn't there. So suddenly I thought, maybe I messed up. It's really nice having admin assistants here at the cathedral, because I don't forget things like this so much, but it was just me at the time, and I wasn't sure if I'd responded. And Bethabel and Abbas were off having their photos taken, and they were the only people I knew at the wedding. So I waited for a little bit, and then they came back. We were having drinks on the lawn. It was very, very English, very summer afternoon, very lovely. And Bethabel kind of walked past me, and I said, Bethabel, my name's not there. Did I not respond? And she said, oh, don't worry about it. Something else is about to happen. This is Abbas's aunt. You stick by her and do whatever she tells you to do. I'm like, okay. What's happening? As we got to the reception hall, people had filled up and filled in seats. And then I noticed that ushers were going up to people and checking with them, and then asking them to vacate seats and go and stand by the side of the hall, and others were being brought in. And at some point, Auntie took me and sat me in a seat and said, stay here. And she sat next to me, and I was like, okay, I'll just do what I'm told. As the day unfolded, I discovered that a number of relatives had turned up, not just a number, quite a few, that hadn't RSVP'd. And they'd just gone into the wedding banquet and sat down without looking at the seating plan. And what Abbas had decided to do as the groom with his best man was to decide all those that didn't RSVP are going to stand to the side, and we'll figure out what to do. We'll seat everybody else, we'll start serving them dinner, and then we'll figure out the rest. Well, then I was sitting there feeling anxious, because I think I hadn't RSVP'd either. But I was the priest, so they were going to sit me anywhere. And I just did what I was told. I bought my food, and then I was watching what was going on in the side of the banquet hall. And it was really interesting because it's a very English kind of environment, but they obviously hosted a lot. So they had lots of spare tables. And they rolled out another 4 tables and set them up along the side of the banquet hall. I don't think they got tablecloths, but they did get tables set out. And then about half an hour later, I saw the ushers coming back in with buckets of KFC. And the thing that I kind of loved is everybody got fed. But if you RSVP'd, you got the steak. And if you didn't, you got the KFC. And everybody was hosted, and everybody felt a certain kind of joy. So I learned a few things from this. I learned exactly what it's like to be in the middle of the gospel story that we heard today, in which sometimes people sat in the wrong seats and were asked to sit lower, and others who were honored guests were asked to sit higher. I learned that you sometimes had to give instructions to people to be really clear about what should happen, and that might feel awkward. But if the ultimate goal is hospitality for everybody, it will work out in the end. And that you can expand the banquet in some way or another to fit everybody, even if it's a trip to KFC. I also learned, if you're instructed by the bride to do whatever what a Nigerian aunt tells you to do, you do that. And nothing else. I'm telling this story partly because it's the one where I feel like I was inhabiting that gospel parable. I'm telling this story also because we're at a banquet this morning. We have a table that's set out here where we serve bread and wine. It's spiritual food and drink, but it is a banquet nonetheless. For the first time in 2.5 years, we're going to serve the wine with the bread. This isn't just a banquet. In the spiritual way in which we relate to the bread and the wine, we are acknowledging that our host is Jesus himself. He is at the head of the table. He's the one that is present in the bread and the wine, and we're invited to be present with him. And I'm also aware that things are going to be different this morning. We're not just going to snap back to how things were 2 years ago, because we've been asked to introduce the wine again in a slightly different way, with some degree of care and thoughtfulness. We want as few hands as possible to touch the host. That's one of the things that's going to happen. We want to make sure that everybody gets served, and that you all get served in relation to your comfort level. Does that make sense? So, there's a couple of things I want to explain, and this is the bit that's going to sound like the safety announcement at the beginning of the flight. And you have to pay attention. But I don't want to forget the graciousness of the moment of the return of the cup. At the altar here, you can come up and kneel at the altar. We're asking you to come and fill from the middle out, and the ushers will guide you to do that. Come to the middle and fill out, not from side to side, the middle out. At the altar, you'll be invited to receive the host with your hand in front of you like this and sip from the cup. There will be wine in both of the chalices at the altar on both sides, and we're inviting you only to sip from the cup at the altar. Okay? You can choose not to receive the wine at all. And as the host passes you, if you choose not to receive the wine at the altar, please just cross your hands on your chest like this so that the person with the wine knows to pass you by. We believe in our theology, as we have over the last 2 years, that if you receive communion in one kind, you have received a complete communion. But I do want to say that we're asking you to exercise your judgment about how you feel safe. And if you're not ready to receive the wine yet, please just let it pass by. The people serving wine at the altar have been trained with good purificator technique, and the wine will be served in a silver-plated cup, which isn't porous and does not harbor bacteria. And so we understand that it's really a safe way to communicate the wine. We're going to have outside stations as well, and this is going to be slightly different than what you're used to. There will be somebody with a pattern on the bread And then 2 chalices. The chalice on the inside, nearest the altar, will have wine in it. The chalice on the outside, furthest away from the altar, will have grape juice in it, for those that prefer it, which is a sign of our hospitality to all who wish to receive something but might not wish to receive alcohol. That will be in a silver chalice also, because again, it's non-porous and it doesn't harbor any kind of bacteria. It will have a little ribbon around the stem, just in case you're not sure. At the side stations, we are asking for people to have dipped hosts only. We're dipping hosts at the side stations only. This will help relieve confusion because of the next bit that I'm going to explain. We're not going to place the host in your hand and have somebody else dip it in the wine, because then it's touched 3 pairs of hands. We're being asked for the person who's distributing the host to do the dipping for you and then place it in your hand. So, you need to let them know whether you would like wine or grape juice. And that means that we're going to do something that's a bit unusual, and it's a bit like going to a restaurant and ordering your meal by making a selection. You're just going to have to either tell them very quietly, grape juice or wine, or point to one of the chalices so that they know which one to dip it in. Does that make sense? If you're at the side and you'd like to receive gluten-free, please just tell them, and the person with the wine will pick that gluten-free one up and also dip it wherever you'd like it to be dipped. And again, at these side spaces, if you don't want to receive wine, please simply cross your hands after you have received the host and move on. And you might just want to say, no wine. Okay? Now, is that going to be awkward and slightly strange? Yes? Hold on. Is it going to be a little uncomfortable today? Yes? But we're going to navigate it as much as we can. And over the next month, I think that all of our very well-trained Eucharistic ministers are going to give me feedback and say what's working and what's not. There's a couple of things that we're trying to use as principles. There's least people to touch the host as possible, and we also won't place it on your lips. Okay, does that make sense? We're trying to be as safe as we can, and over the next few weeks we might figure out ways of doing this a little more elegantly if we can. But the thing that I really want to finish on is to say that this might also be a bit emotional. I don't know about you, but we've not done this for 2 years. And we're restarting a practice that we love in a slightly different way. But there will still be the taste of wine or grape juice. There'll still be the reminder of that practice that we've practiced for years, some of us for our whole lives. You might find yourself being slightly emotional as it happens. And I would say, feel that feeling. Own that feeling. Be present with it. And we are going to work out how to elegantly serve everybody and make sure that this table is open to all in relation to your comfort. I hope that's going to be all okay. I'm sure you'll let me know later exactly what you think, and that will be fine. One last thing. If there's a little dialogue between you and the person receiving, that's okay. If you're confused and you need to ask a question, just do it quietly and gently. One thing that we noticed at 7:30, sometimes people got confused and they got the host placed in their hand and then they wanted it taken back and dipped. We'd rather that not happen, because then multiple hands have touched it. So if that happens and you just got confused, ask for another host, and that's going to be okay. In this set of circumstances, in terms of the graciousness we're practicing, just consume that host and then have another host dipped for you if that's what you wanted. If there's a little dialogue going on between you and the priest or the person carrying the chalice, that's going to be okay today. All right. Thank you. You're laughing at me. I'm the Nigerian aunt. Do what I say. Amen.